Can you actually raise money without being a nonprofit? Here are 5 things you need to consider if you're thinking about starting a fundraising campaign. This video is especially for people who want to do mutual aid. So that's just people who want to raise money to benefit other folks. They want to pass money to other people. You need $40 for medicine, you need $50 for groceries. We want to collect money as a community and disperse it to other people. There are people who do this all over the country, and there are ways you can do it correctly, and there are ways you can do it that can really get you in trouble. So I want you to keep watching to the end, because every point really matters, and you need to think about all of this before you start fundraising. I'm Tiffany. I created Boss on a Budget to teach people how to start nonprofits and how to raise money from the ground up. The first big thing you really need to consider is how you're collecting the money and where the money will be housed. Are you collecting only cash? Are you using Cash App, Venmo, PayPal? Are you using a donation platform? If you're using Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal, they're likely going to report whatever income that's coming to your account to the IRS, and you may get a surprise at the end of the year where they want you to pay tax on that. It really does depend on how the money is reported, and it depends on how much money is actually reported in total. If you're using a donation platform, which is a software or services or an app that's set up to collect donations. GoFundMe is one for individuals, but there are a lot for nonprofits and PTAs and organizations like GiveButter, Zeffy, Give Lively, Donately. There's just so many out there right now. But if you're going to use some of those donation platforms, sometimes they require you to have 501c3 status in order to sign up. Sometimes they require you to at least be an organization, and they're all going to require some kind of bank account. So if you are collecting money, is that going to be going to your personal bank account, or is it going to a different kind of bank account? Well, if it's going to a different kind of bank account, then it probably is an organizational bank account. And if you're trying to set up a bank account with a bank, they're probably going to want to see some paperwork around incorporating or trying to figure out what structure you are. Now, bank rules really differ depending on the state, depending on the type of bank. So all of this is very general information. I'm just giving you a heads up of the things you need to consider when you're trying to collect money. That leads me to my next point. Are you going to incorporate as an organization, or are you doing this as an individual, or are you doing this as a group of individuals? If you're doing it as an organization, are you doing it as a for-profit organization? Are you doing it as a nonprofit venture? And there are many different types of nonprofits. There are many different types of 501c organizations. 501c3 is not the only type of federal tax exempt status that exists out there. So you have to decide if you are going to incorporate, if you are going to do this within a business structure, what kind of structure is that going to be? Say like you have an LLC already, right? And maybe you're going to collect donations in the name of your LLC. Well, just know that if it's going into your bank account, that's income. And you may be able to classify it as a gift. I'm not an accountant, and I'm definitely not your accountant. So you need to consult with somebody who practices in your state to help understand what the rules are at the state level and at the federal level when it comes to collecting donations and collecting money for a charitable purpose. But you just need to understand what kind of entity is collecting the money and on whose behalf, right? So if you're doing it as an individual, then it means the money might be going to your bank account. But what if you're just doing Cash App and you're just leaving it in Cash App? Well, that has its own sets of implications, as I talked about before, in terms of a tax liability that you may owe if Cash App reports that money to the IRS. You might be really interested to watch a video I did on this a couple years ago about a man who was collecting money during COVID, and he ended up with a major tax bill, a 5-figure tax bill, as a result of him collecting all this money. The bottom line is you do not have to incorporate, but if you don't, there are certain considerations that you need to think about. And if you do, honestly, if you decide to incorporate, or if you decide to have a nonprofit and be a 501c3, there's a whole host of things you need to think about, which is why I have my channel. If you're interested in starting a nonprofit, I do have a free startup checklist that walks you through all of the steps to get yourself prepared. If you want that checklist, just comment startup checklist below and I'll send it to you. The third thing you want to think about is fiscal sponsorship. So after you heard what I just talked about, you're probably in your mind thinking, I'm not trying to get a tax bill. I'm just trying to help somebody, right? But there are options around that. One of those options is fiscal sponsorship. And that's when you can use the 501c3 status of another organization to collect money. Now that typically comes with a fee. So they have to handle the administrative part of collecting donations and reporting that money. And that costs time and money for that organization. So they're going to charge you a fee. And it depends on the organization what that fee is. It may be 5%, it may be 15%. There may be different rules, different agreements, different types of support they provide you with that fiscal sponsorship. But it is a possibility if people want to donate to an actual organization and they want to deduct those donations on their taxes. If you're looking for a fiscal sponsor, start with your local community foundation. Just Google community foundation and the name of your state and they will all pop up for you. Start there. And there are other fiscal sponsorship organizations that work in different types of genres, that work in the arts or that work in human services. And you may find that by doing some digging around. But one of the best places to start is your community foundation. The fourth thing you want to think about is, are you collecting for individuals when you're fundraising, or are you collecting for a collection of people or a collective of people? This matters because there's a thing called charitable solicitation. I'm gonna say it again because you need to remember this term, charitable solicitation. And these are just rules that each state sets up in terms of who's allowed to ask for charity, who's allowed to ask for donations. Now, the rules differ from state to state, so it depends on where you're collecting the donations. If you're collecting donations in one state, but you're from another state or reside in another state, you got to go off the state where the people are donating to you. That's how it goes. It's very similar to sales tax, and every state is different. Sometimes if you have a website and you have a donate button on that website, they want you to apply first for charitable solicitation and pay an annual fee. And you have to supply information about your organization before you do that. Sometimes they want you to do that before you even ask for money. And a lot of people don't know about these rules, so they're often finding out after the fact. I'm just telling you that there are some states who want you to know these rules and abide by these rules before you ask for one dime. Now, there are exemptions and it depends. Sometimes the rules are just for charitable organizations or nonprofits. And if you're raising money for individuals, it doesn't apply. Sometimes if you're only raising a certain amount, then it doesn't matter as much to them and that may be exempt. But I can't tell you because every state is completely different. Usually if you're fundraising just for an individual, say like a person is getting evicted and you're doing a quick campaign to raise money for their rent, usually that is okay. Usually you don't have to apply for charitable solicitation. But again, every state's different. But if you're collecting money for when people may need help, you're collecting money and doing a campaign to help people with their rent, and then when it comes up, then you're giving the money out, then that may trigger the need for applying for charitable solicitation. So just look up that term in your state. Some states don't require it, but most states do. So just know the rules first before you ask for money so you don't find yourself in trouble, because there are fees attached to asking for money when you haven't gone through the proper processes. And the last one is really important. It's about transparency. So if you're collecting money, obviously people want to feel like you're trustworthy. And one way you can invoke trust in people is, first of all, to be honest about what you're collecting, how much you collect, and where the money is going. So have a process in place for tracking how much money you collect, tracking where you get the money from, who donates, and tracking where the money goes, tracking what you spend that money on. Be honest and upfront about where you're spending that money, especially if you are dealing in cash. And if you're dealing in cash, especially, make sure you have procedures about how you're handling cash. So if it's a group of people doing this, then it should be more than one person who's watching or managing the cash collection process. Maybe one person is collecting it, another person is counting it and accounting for it, right? You need to have two people kind of part of that process so there's no leaks or no potential opportunities for fraud or theft or things like that. And you don't want to assume that's going to happen when people really are doing this for other people's good. But let's just be honest, there are often news articles about people using donations in the wrong way. So you want to be on the up and up. You want to be transparent with your donors. And if you're going to do this on an ongoing basis, then it's really important for those donors, if they want to give to you again, it's really important for them to believe that you're trustworthy and believe you're using the money responsibly. So just pay attention to transparency and your procedures around handling cash, your procedures around accounting. And it may not hurt to talk to an accountant, first of all, just to know how you're tracking this money so that you don't get a big tax bill, but also just for how to document it correctly and giving you pointers for how to document so everything can be on the up and up. If you want to know more about how to collect donations, then this video that I did talking about donation platforms and how to collect money would really interest you. It's going to come up at the end of this video. Thanks so much for watching. If you need help with starting a nonprofit, don't forget to visit me at bossonabudget.com, and I'll see you in the next video.